October retail sales coming in slightly stronger than expected, up 0.4%. Estimates were calling for an increase of 0.3%. Also seeing a big upward revision to the September data, now an increase of 0.8%. That was up from the prior reading of an increase of 0.4%. We want to bring in Jerome Martis, LSEG's Director of Consumer Research. And Jerome, when you take a look at these numbers, obviously pointing to the fact that the economy is maybe stronger than many forecasters had anticipated up until this point. What's your big takeaway from today's print?
So when you dig into the data, it is very key that the one number that stood out was the year-over-year growth on e-commerce sales. That grew a robust 7%. And this is telling because last year, October, we also saw a very strong October Amazon Prime Week. And it doesn't just benefit Amazon. There's a lot of other retailers that piggyback on the event. So the fact that it grew 7% on top of a very strong Prime Week last year, it's telling us that the consumer is still gravitating towards those online deals. They're still being very price conscious and are only opening up their wallet for those discretionary items unless they feel that they're getting a discount, a value for their money.
Which retailers do you believe are making the best transition and transformation to a digital first mindset, or at least a digital leading transformation for their growth story? Absolutely.
The one retailer that is giving Amazon a big competition is Walmart. In fact, according to our StarMine data, Walmart is likely to beat earnings estimates and post a positive surprise next week when they report. And this is mainly because of that, exactly what you talked about. They're giving the consumer the ability to shop the way they want to, whether it be like ordering it on your mobile on your way and picking it up at the store on your way home, or just, having it delivered right there from the store to your house. Walmart is definitely giving Amazon a lot of competition. Not only that, but what's key is that Walmart gained so many shoppers during the pandemic. And then on top of that, then it gained even more shoppers over the past 2 years that were looking to trade down. A lot of upper middle class consumers, high-end consumers, and as a result, that now translates into loyalty. Consumers that are coming to Walmart as a one-stop shop. And therefore, they're likely to do very well over the next 2 quarters, this quarter and next quarter.
So how does it set us up then going into the very important holiday season? Those strong growth trends, is that something that you expect to continue?
Yes, but also what's key on consumers' mind right now is that value proposition. Right? And that's why Walmart has become the one-stop shop. Other retailers that are also expected to do well are, for example, the Gap. This is because of its Old Navy division, which has kind of had a comeback, especially during the back-to-school season, and is one of the favorites going into the holiday season. Off-price retailers like TJX and Ross, because those consumers still want designer clothing for less. Those are the names that are going to be doing well for the holiday season.
How much more of a drag do you think there is on some of the home furnishings stores, as we've kind of seen that be a through line between the CPI report and now between the retail sales data as well?
So it's interesting because we're kind of making that transition, whereas we might see a pickup on that in 2025. Reason being is already today we saw some signs in the retail sales numbers. When you look at the month-over-month data, the strongest segment there was electronic and appliances. This was a sector that was the strongest, remember, during the pandemic. So which means that that strength could signify that we're seeing that consumers are finally renewing some of those products, right? So we might be starting to enter in that cycle where we will see some renewals of those products, especially in the home furnishing, but in 2025.
What about the risk of tariffs? Is that essentially, or could this essentially halt some of this momentum?
Potentially, yes. It's interesting that you mentioned that because about 20% of the retailers that already reported have mentioned tariffs in their earnings call, especially Home Depot this week. And it's important to know that retailers do have options, especially a retailer like Walmart, who is very powerful. They can either choose to not hurt their gross margins and just change the supplier. They can absorb the cost. Or one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of retailers have now diversified their suppliers list, especially after everything that happened during the pandemic. And that's what I think that was the message of Home Depot. This will be impacted industry-wide, but it's not our first time to the rodeo.
What would you say the vibe is overall? We only have about 15 seconds here. The vibe of the consumer going into the holiday season right now. We've heard words like resilient. We've heard battle tested before. What would you kind of summarize the consumer as ahead of the key shopping season?
That's interesting you mentioned that word because I think it's more of a battle between the retailer and the consumer. The consumer is value oriented and is looking for all those deals, but the retailer is still being very stubborn. In a collaboration with Centric Market Intelligence, we discovered that retailers are not giving consumers the discounts that they want. Remember, what is the magic number? 40%, unless you're getting that 40%, and they have been very stingy. They've been giving the consumer 33%, even during Amazon Prime Week. So.
All right. I know who to look. I don't know. Do I go up to the cashier and say, "Hey, I just want that 40%"?
You can negotiate.
Yeah? Okay.
Yes,
do that.
especially if it's the last item on the shelf.
Look, coming from the household I grew up in, negotiation was a top skill and tactic that was taught. Jerome Martis, who is the LSEG Director of Consumer Research, joining us here on set. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.